going to show you how to muck around with the tangents brush in Aleph Null 3 or 3.1. Let's go to 3.1, which is at this URL, vispo.com/aleph4/an.html. And I'm going to close this window, which is useful. It shows you how to play with Aleph Null, and you click these buttons to learn more. But anyway, you have a video now. You don't need that for the moment. So where is the tangents brush? Well, it's over here. So let's click on that. And up comes this brush that I've done a lot of work with, actually. I've created a lot of images with this particular one. It's one of my favorites in Aleph Null. And I'm going to go full screen on the PC. The F11 key toggles full screen mode. Okay, well, now that I've selected it, if I click it again, if I click that icon again, nothing comes up, which contrasts with, say, if I click this brush, then I click it again, then this nib options window comes up. And you get that in the case where the nib is sampling from bitmaps, but this nib, the tangents nib, does not sample from bitmaps. It's using complex gradients is what it's doing. Each frame of the animation, what it's doing is drawing a straight line, as you can see, and along that straight line are distributed many gradients, somewhat randomly, but there's a central color as well, as we'll see. So anyway, here's where you select the central color. If I click that, up comes a color picker, which is not an RGB color picker, but an HSL color picker. This wheel gives us a hue, and the square gives us the saturation and the lightness. So anyway, currently we have the color that's indicated. We have this gray color selected as the central color. But let me pick something obvious like orange. Now you see the difference that makes immediately in what is drawn in Aleph Null. And generally that's the case. You know, if you don't know what a control does, click it and see what happens. Should be visible. That's kind of my philosophy in making these controls, is that you shouldn't really need a help file. It should just be visible. What happens when you do something, you should be able to see the difference. And that's part of what should make it fun as well. You can click around and see the difference. You don't have to study it with a textbook. You can just click around and see what's going on with these controls. Okay, so that's the central color. And all of the colors that the nib is drawing are centered around the central color. Like currently it's drawing a bunch of different gradients, and those gradients are, well, how far away are they from the central color? Well, this color range slider determines how far away they can be. Currently it's at 83. If I bring that down quite a bit, then what's the difference that you see? Well, the difference that you see is that it looks a lot more orange, right? In other words, the colors are a lot closer to the central color, which itself is orange. Okay, and if I bring that down to 0, what happens? Well, if I bring it down to 0, the only color it draws is the central color. All right, so if I bring it up, what happens? Yeah, sure enough, now we've got a lot more color. So selecting a central color and a color range pretty much selects a palette. BG color, what do you think this does? It changes, you guessed it, the background color. So if I change that to black, then So it doesn't really look very black, look kind of gray, the central color. Okay, well, when I click the erase button, it erases everything, and that background does look pretty black to me. Doesn't that look black to you? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to leave the background black. I actually prefer a white background for most of the work that I do. You can do some good work with a black background as well, but mostly I prefer a white background. Alright, so we got the central color, we got the BG color, we got the color range. Opacity, well, you know what that does. That changes the opacity of the thing. Now if I click the erase button again, you can see that it's less opaque. There are parts of it that are less opaque than they were, and if I increase that all the way, then you can immediately see the difference. You can immediately see that it gets more opaque, right? Whereas if I bring that down, then erase the screen, it's kind of subtle, isn't it? But it is an opacity matter, isn't it? You can see the difference between that and I bring it all the way up. That. Yeah, you can. So that's the opacity slider. And with all these sliders, you can either use this grabber and change it like that, or you can use these buttons here, which allow you more granular control. Also, you can use the keyboard. You can use the right and left arrow keys on the keyboard. Once you have clicked this thing, then you can use those keyboard controls. Also, these numbers here are to tell you what you press in order to select this. Now, say I want to select this thing. Well, actually, why don't we say this one, seeing it's the next one. Say I want to select, well, it's the fader. It says 5 right here, so if I click 5 on the keyboard, then this thing gets selected, right? So these numbers are to tell you how to select these sliders with the keyboard. Okay, so the fader, what's going on with the fader? Well, let me just put it up. So, okay, what does the fader do? The fader fades the thing. Yes, it does. Surprise. And if I bring the fader down, it fades less. Yes, it does. And if I bring it up, it fades more. Yeah. So there you go. That's what the fader does. Fader also tells you what layer this brush is on. You can have multiple brushes in Aleph Null, and you can move a brush from layer to layer if you want. If you have multiple brushes, you can move them from layer to layer. So it tells you what layer the brush is on. Yeah, so the fader's kind of cool. You can see that as it does its thing, not only does it fade it out, but it looks like sort of like watercolors. It looks like exposed to water. So I like the fader. And the fader is useful because, you know, if you've got multiple brushes and they're on different layers, then the fader makes it so that you can see what's on a lower layer if you make the higher layers fade out. So yeah, there's the fader. Now what's this next one? Well, we can't see what it says. It says BPS, brushstrokes per second. So this is basically the speed. Now, as you mouse over something, you see that there's help for it down here. So when I mouse over the BPS slider, what it says down there is BPS, brushstrokes per second. The real BPS value is what the brush is actually performing at. So there's two values. There's this Well, they're currently both 240. Well, this one's changing a little bit from time to time. Well, this is what you set it to, and this is what it's actually performing at. You know, if you've got a slow computer and you put this up really high, maybe your computer isn't fast enough to hit that value, so it tells you what it's actually doing in terms of brush strokes per second. So as I increase this, sure enough, it gets faster, right? So brush strokes per second. And if I max that out, it's just nutty. It's just a little too fast, right? And these sorts of brushes that are using gradients rather than sampling bitmaps, they're very fast. Whereas the brushes that sample bitmaps, sample images, they're slower because they got a lot more graphical work to do in opening those pictures and sampling from them and stuff. So anyway, this slider does indeed let you set the speed of this thing. Next one is size. Yeah, well, you know, if I bring that down, the size of the slider, the size of the nib is, you can see it's a lot less, and if I bring it up, yeah, sure enough, yeah, it's a lot bigger. Yeah. Okay. So what's this one? This rhythm slider. Let me set it to 0. What we find when we set it to 0 is that the length of the brush remains constant. Let me bring down the size of it. This is a little too big. Yeah. Yeah, that's more of a decent size. Okay, so rhythm 0, the length of the brush remains constant, but if I bring this up to 1, then what we see is that the length of the brush gets smaller and then it gets larger. And it gets smaller by 1 pixel per frame. And when it reaches a minimum, it starts getting larger again. So this is a measurement of how much the brush changes in size per frame. Now, why is it called rhythm? Well, it's kind of the visual with rhythm. So if I really increase this, you can see that it's currently got a kind of a visual rhythm. So let me bring that down. And you see the rhythm has changed a little bit. The beat has changed. Let me bring it down again. Yeah, the beat has changed again. Bring it down again. Yeah, beat's changed again. So you can see why I call it the rhythm brush, because it's, you know, visual rhythm. If I bring this up way high, then it's changing 100 pixels per frame in size. So it's still visual rhythm, but it's barely got a visual rhythm owing to the change in size. The visual rhythm is more a matter of something else. So if I bring this down, there, it's got a pretty quick visual rhythm there. Bring it down to there. Now it's starting to, yeah, it's still pretty quick though, 19 pixels per second. Yeah, so you can set the visual rhythm with this slider. Okay, what's this one? Line width. Well, what do you think this does? Yeah, it changes the line width. Bring it down to 0, and it's actually 1. I'm going to change the rhythm down to 0, which is how I usually have this particular one set. I don't usually do anything. If I have this one set, it's either at 0 or it's at 1. That's normally how I use these things. Anyway, the line width is the measure of the width of the line. It looks pretty thin right now, so let's beef it up to, say, 6. And sure enough, it looks a little bit thicker now, and it also is laying down more paint, which you would expect from a thicker line. Now, what's this one? Rotation speed. Well, actually, that doesn't apply to this brush. This brush, what's it doing? Well, it's traversing a curve and it's remaining constantly tangent to the curve. So it's rotating, but the rotation is a function of the curve that it's following, not this slider. If we change it to, say, this brush, then we see that this thing is rotating, this curve is rotating. But if I bring that down to, say, 0, then we see that the curve is no longer rotating. It's remaining constantly, at the same angle. Maybe that's a little bit more obvious if I use this brush. This is a straight line. Like the tangent brush is a straight line, but this line is rotating about its own axis. Now let me change that rotation to 0. And sure enough, it's not rotating on its axis anymore. It is moving along a path, but it's not rotating on its own axis anymore, which is what this thing measures. So that's what this one is about. What about these buttons? Well, tips. If I click that, makes this window visible again. This is the window that you use to read how to use Aleph Null. What about this? Brush position. Click this button repeatedly to cycle through the following possibilities. Blah, blah, blah. Well, if I click it once, it says mouse. And now if I move this thing around, we see that the position of the brush is controlled by the mouse. And if I click it again, it says click list. So now I can click a few times to give it a list of points to hit. Click this button repeatedly to cycle through the following possibilities. How does it work again? Click list. Click a series of points that the brush will cycle through as brush position. Double click to end the definition phase. Okay. I would say this feature is not working with this brush. It talks about the Bill Bissett brush. So let me try it with the Bill Bissett brush. Okay, I'm going to bring the size down. So currently these circles are being drawn in random locations. So let me change to mouse to click list. So I'm going to click here and here, and then I'm going to double click. So now it's drawing here, and then here, then here, then here, then here, then here. So this gives you a way to position these things better. But it works for some brushes and not for others, this click list feature, as we saw. Okay, so how about this button? Well, it brings up the about. There's a lot of information in this. Yeah. So you don't want to read more about this. So. Share. So say I want to share the Bill Bissett brush. I like the other brushes, but I want to share the Bill Bissett brush. Well, the Bill Bissett brush is currently the editable brush, as we can see, because it says right here. So if I click share, then this window comes up and it says that URL has been copied to the clipboard, pasted into email or social media to share Aleph Null's currently editable brush with friends. So yeah, the share button is to share the currently editable brush. Canvas. Currently says 1920 by 1080. That's the size of my monitor. But if you want to make it bigger, you can make this as big as you want. It's a kind of a very interesting feature if you think about it. Okay, and what's this? This is the save button. So say I like this picture and I want to save it. Click the save button. Now, where has Aleph Null gone? Well, it has disappeared. What we're looking at is it's saved this image to a new tab. Really? Let me click F11 to get out of full screen. Yeah. Well, we see up here, we see we've got two tabs now, and this one has a weird name. If we go back to this one, we've got the Aleph Null controls, and we see it's animating, whereas this one is just a bitmap. And you can save this if you like by right-clicking and clicking Save Image As. This is a PNG image. So now we're back in Aleph Null itself, and we've gone through all these things. So that's how to use some of the controls in this thing. We haven't talked about these ones up here. But you're tired, aren't you? I know you. All right, let's call it quits.